There is a kind of weapon that draws no blade and fires no shot, and people have reached for it for a very long time. In the Americas, some historical accounts describe defenders reaching for it when they were attacked. Dried pods were burned so the wind would carry the smoke into the people closing in. What rose off those flames was not smoke you could stand in. It seized the throat and stung the eyes, and anyone caught in it was left coughing and half blind. No blade had touched them. They had simply been made to breathe a plant. That plant is on your dinner table tonight. It hangs in bright bunches in every market on earth, in 100 colors and 1,000 names, and the world grows tens of millions of tons of it a year. Before Columbus crossed the Atlantic, outside the Americas, that number was 0. Not one chili in Asia, not one in Africa, not one in Europe. And then, in a few generations, it was everywhere. This one small fruit underwent one of the most dramatic crop migrations in all of history, and it spread not by supplying calories, but by inflicting a pain people learned to crave. Because the chili pepper was never just a flavor, it was always a weapon. The heat we reach for to make dinner exciting is a chemical the plant evolved to cause pain, and long before chemistry ever named the molecule, the people who used it understood that its power came from pain. But the story does not start in a kitchen, or on a spice ship, or even with people at all. It starts millions of years before any of that, with a plant in the wild that had a problem to solve. And solved it with fire. Here is the strange truth underneath every hot meal you have ever eaten. The heat in a chili is not there to feed you. Capsaicin, the molecule behind the burn, provides no nourishment at all. It is an irritant, a threat written in chemistry, and nothing about it is an accident. The reason is seeds. A wild chili wants animals to eat its fruit and scatter its seeds far away. But not just any animal. When many seed-eating mammals chew a chili, their teeth and gut destroy the seeds, so the plant gains nothing and loses its children. Birds are different. Many birds swallow the fruit whole, fly for miles, and pass the seeds intact and neatly fertilized. So the plant needed a way to invite the birds and repel the mammals at the same time. Capsaicin is that way. Many fruit-eating birds are far less sensitive to it. The receptor that screams in a mammal's mouth hardly responds in a bird, so a chili pepper is agony to a mouse and all but painless to a sparrow. Scientists have a name for this trick. They call it directed deterrence, and it was described in the journal Nature in 2001. The burn you feel is not an accident of flavor. It is a message, and the message was never meant for you. It was meant to say, to every creature with teeth like yours, do not eat this. Then a creature with teeth exactly like that came along, tasted the warning, and decided it liked being warned. The people of ancient Mesoamerica did not stumble onto chili. Across many centuries, generations of farmers and cooks wove it deep into their world. In the valleys of Mexico, farmers were growing and shaping wild peppers into domesticated crops at least 6,000 years ago, older than the pyramids of Giza. By the time of the Aztecs, chili was food, medicine, and money all at once. Provinces paid it to the state as tribute, whole loads of dried pods flowing into the capital as tax. Healers folded it into remedies. It flavored nearly everything the empire ate. But they never forgot what the plant actually was. They understood, better than we pretend to, that its gift was pain. And they used the pain deliberately. A codex painted around the time the Spanish arrived, the Codex Mendoza, records the everyday life of Aztec families, and one of its pages shows a parent disciplining a child by holding them over the smoke of burning chilies. The codex presents it plainly, without drama, as one entry in a whole sequence of childhood instruction and discipline. The plant that repelled a mouse was now turned on a child. And other historical accounts describe that same smoke turned against attackers, the wall of choking fire that opens this story. A plant that a mouse could not bite had become something a soldier could not breathe. For thousands of years, all of this stayed locked inside one half of the world. The peoples of the Americas had a plant that could season a feast, enter a remedy, discipline a child, and drive back an attack, and no one on the other side of the ocean had the faintest idea it existed. Then, on the far side of that ocean, a man went looking for something else entirely. In 1492, Christopher Columbus was not hunting Chile. He had never heard of it. He was hunting a western road to Asia, and the spices, above all black pepper, that made that road worth a fortune. To understand why a man would risk the open Atlantic for a spice, you have to understand what black pepper was worth. In Europe, it was a luxury bordering on currency, and the trade was controlled near the top. Venetian merchants and the Ottoman and Egyptian powers who sat astride the routes to Asia took their cut of nearly every load and shaped the price. Columbus sailed west with a simple, enormous idea, reach the source by a new road, and break the monopoly that was making other men rich. He failed at exactly that, and in failing, found something larger. On the islands of the Caribbean, and then, across the mainland, the Spanish found a plant the locals called age, a pod that burned like the pepper Columbus knew, but grew on a completely different plant. Hunting pimienta, the Spanish word for pepper, he called this new thing pimiento. He gave it the wrong name, the name of the spice he had crossed an ocean to find and never reached. And that wrong name has clung to it for 500 years. We still call it pepper today, though it is no relation to the peppercorn at all. The physician on Columbus's second voyage, a man named Diego Livarez Chanca, wrote the earliest surviving European description of it around 1494, noting how the people ate it and how fiercely it bit. He is often credited with carrying the first pods back to Spain, and there, European growers soon noticed the thing that would change the world. This new pepper had a quality the old one never could. The choice to plant it and sell it looked harmless on the ledger. It was not. Here was the quality that mattered, the one that made kings and merchants nervous. Black pepper grew on a slow tropical vine that demanded a specific climate, which was exactly why a handful of powers could hoard it and dictate the price. Chili grew from a seed, in a single season, in a pot or a patch of dirt, in almost any warm place on earth. You could not corner it. You could not guard it. The moment the seeds left the Americas, the old kind of geographic monopoly became almost impossible to enforce, and the people who carried those seeds fastest were the Portuguese. Portugal had spent decades and lives building a seaborne empire, a web of trading forts and shipping lanes that reached down the coast of Africa and around to India and beyond, the same network that moved its goods and, along many of those same routes, its human cargo in the growing Atlantic slave trade. Onto those ships went the Chili. It moved with the traffic of empire, and empire moved everywhere. The speed of what happened next is difficult to believe. Within a century of Columbus, Chili had crossed into West Africa, taken root in India and Southeast Asia, and appeared in the written records of China. A botanist named Garcia da Horta, writing from Portuguese Goa in 1563, described Chili as already well established in India. A plant that had spent 6,000 years on one side of the world had transformed the other side in only a few generations. And crucially, its decisive adopters were often not the rich. In many places, it took hold fastest among ordinary and poorer households. Because it was cheap, it grew anywhere, and it turned a dull bowl of rice or gruel into something a person could actually want to eat. That is the part of this story almost nobody tells. Chili did not conquer the world from the top down. It rose from the bottom. Follow the Chili into China and you find the clearest proof of what this plant really did. It arrived late, first recorded in a Chinese text in 1591, and for a while the elite treated it as a curiosity, an ornamental plant with pretty pods, not something a refined person would eat. The refined person could afford flavor. The refined person had salt. Salt is the key. In the poor mountainous inland province of Guizhou, salt was scarce and expensive, sometimes barely available at all, and salt was not a luxury there, it was a necessity the body demands. So the people of Guizhou reached for the one thing that was cheap that grew on their own hillsides, and that could do salt's other job. They used chili where others used salt to make plain food come alive on the tongue. Historian Brian Dott, who wrote a full study of the pepper in China, documents this pattern. In parts of inland China, chili heat took hold not as an elite delicacy, but as an affordable way to make low-salt, everyday food satisfying. Variations of that pattern appeared across the world. An inexpensive imported plant entered local food for different reasons in different places, then became so familiar that it felt native. Sichuan, the Chinese region whose name is now synonymous with mouth-numbing heat, had no chili at all until the late 1600s or 1700s. Red kimchi and gochujang became powerful symbols of Korean cuisine and identity, yet older kimchi was not even red, because the chili to make it red did not arrive until the late 1500s. And India, the country the entire world pictures when it thinks of spice, one of the world's great growers and eaters of chili today, had never tasted one before Portuguese maritime networks introduced it. Indian heat, before that, came from black pepper, long pepper, ginger, mustard, and other native spices. Think about what that means. The chili-defined versions of the foods we now call the most ancient and fiery on earth, the Indian curry, the Sichuan hot pot, the Korean stew, the Thai bowl that makes your eyes water, are all younger than Gutenberg's printing press. The cuisines are ancient. Their chili heat is not. But the same ships that carried this fire outward were carrying something far darker in the other direction. The clock was already ticking. The world just could not hear it yet. This is the part of chili's history that most people never learn, because the cost of it was paid on the far side of the world. Here is the darkest arithmetic in the whole story, and it is not written in the chili, it is written in the people it left behind. The chili pepper spread across the entire globe on the ships of what historians call the Columbian Exchange. The vast movement of crops and animals and diseases and people that followed 1492. And that same exchange, those same ships, those same years, brought something else to the Americas. They brought smallpox, measles, and influenza to peoples with little or no prior immunity, at the same time as conquest, displacement, and hunger were tearing through their communities. In the century after Columbus, the indigenous population of the Americas did not decline. It collapsed. By many careful estimates, the great civilizations of the Americas lost the overwhelming majority of their people, region after region, generation upon generation, to disease and conquest and forced labor. Sit with the shape of that. The indigenous peoples of the Americas, across many cultures and thousands of years, had turned a wild, stinging weed into the domesticated crop that would flavor half of humanity. They gave the world its fire, and then the world that took the fire brought them catastrophe. The Aztec state that once collected chili as tribute fell within 2 years of the Spanish reaching its capital, and it did not fall to Spanish soldiers alone. Tens of thousands of indigenous allies, rival peoples with their own grievances against the Aztecs, marched on the capital beside them. The plant crossed every ocean and thrived on every continent. The people who created it endured conquest, epidemic disease, and forced labor on a scale the world had rarely seen. The pepper felt nothing, of course. It multiplied. It flourished in Africa and Asia, while conquest and epidemic disease remade the societies that had cultivated it for millennia. And no ledger anywhere recorded the trade honestly. The world gained a beloved spice and looked away from the peoples who had spent thousands of years creating it. To this day, most people who eat chili have no idea that its origin story runs straight through one of history's great catastrophes. The fire crossed every border on Earth. The people who made it were very nearly written out of its own story. But written out is not the same as gone. Their descendants are still here and still growing the peppers their ancestors made. Stories like this, the human cost buried inside the most ordinary things on your table, are what this channel exists to tell. Stay with this one, because the next turn of the chili story is stranger still. While all of this was unfolding, a race was being won that no one even realized was a race. Picture the great powers of Europe in the 1500s, all of them still chasing the same golden dream. Break the spice monopoly. Find the road to the peppercorn and the clove and the nutmeg, and grow richer than the Venetians who had cornered it. Portugal races around Africa. Spain gambles on the West. Later, the Dutch and the English will fight and bleed and drown over tiny islands, burning through fortunes and fleets to own the source of a handful of guarded spices. And the entire time, right under their feet, the kind of scarcity they are killing themselves to control is quietly slipping out of anyone's grip, carried by a plant none of them are guarding. So did this one plant break the great spice monopoly? Not the way a war breaks it. Something quieter and much harder to stop. Watch how easily it happens. Seeds arrive at a port like Goa. A local farmer plants them, and the next season there are 100 plants, then a whole district growing its own heat instead of paying for someone else's. No fleet protects it. No treaty controls it. It never provoked the kind of wars fought over a few fixed island sources, because there was no single source to seize. The old spice trade did not vanish. Pepper and cloves and nutmeg would stay valuable for a long time yet. But chili broke one crucial piece of that system. Pungency no longer had to come from a distant vine, pass through guarded routes, and stay expensive. A handful of seeds could put a source of heat in almost any warm place on Earth. Chili did not destroy the spice trade. It made pungency something you could grow at home. That should have been the happy ending. The people's spice, cheap and free and unstoppable, out of the hands of the hoarders at last. And for a few centuries, that is nearly what it looked like. But the chili had one more turn left in it, and this one brings the weapon all the way back to where it started. To see the last turn, you first have to understand what capsaicin actually does to a human body, because for a long time, nobody could even measure it. In 1912, a pharmacist named Wilbur Scoville built the first scale to rank a pepper's heat, and we still use his name today, the Scoville scale. But the real answer took another 80 years. In the 1990s, a scientist named David Julius set out to find exactly how capsaicin causes pain, and what he found was almost too neat to be true. Capsaicin latches onto a receptor in your nerves called TRPV1, one of your body's real alarms for painful heat, the sensor that fires when you touch a hot stove. Capsaicin picks that lock. It trips the burn alarm with no flame behind it. In the amount sitting in your dinner, your nerves report a fire, but there is no injury to match the panic. Your mouth insists it is on fire while nothing is actually burning it. That work helped earn Julius a share of the 2021 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. So, the pleasure of hot food is a magnificent lie your own nerves tell you, and there is even a name for why we enjoy it. Researchers call it benign masochism, the strange human delight in a threatening sensation when the mind knows the situation is controlled, the same thrill as a roller coaster served on a plate. We may be the only animal that seeks out the plant's warning on purpose, for fun. And this is the part that should make you angry. Because that same family of pain-producing compounds, the plant's ancient defense against the mammal mouth, has been extracted from peppers, concentrated, and turned into an actual weapon aimed at people. The extract is called oleoricin capsicum. You know it as pepper spray. The concentrated fire of the chili, canned police forces began adopting it widely in the late 1980s, and it grew into a standard tool of crowd control across the world. It is promoted as a less lethal alternative to firearms and heavier force. And yet, even as it spread, deaths in custody following its use triggered investigation after investigation. In one major review, other causes dominated nearly every case: restraint, intoxication, heart disease, respiratory illness. Pepper spray was rarely named as the primary cause, but its role could not always be dismissed, especially when breathing was already compromised. The oldest question about the plant had become a medical one. What happens when you fire its mammal defense straight into a human airway? Follow the chili all the way around and the circle closes with a chill. A wild plant invents a chemical to drive mammals away. Humans taste it, love it, and carry it to every corner of the earth. And then, at the end of the journey, we concentrate those same defensive compounds back into their original purpose: a weapon to make a mammal stop. The plant was right about us the whole time. So look again at the chili in your kitchen, in the jar of flakes, the bottle of hot sauce, the fresh red pot on the cutting board. That heat is not a flavor the way sweetness or salt is a flavor. It is a warning millions of years older than the kitchen, and you have decided to enjoy it. It was there in the wild, burning the mouths of mice to save its seeds for the birds. It was there in the Aztec courts, paid as tribute, used as punishment, thrown on the fires of war. It was there on the Portuguese ships, riding the routes of empire and bondage across the oceans while the people who made it were being conquered. It was there in the mountain kitchens of Guizhou and in ordinary kitchens from Goa to Korea, giving plain food an affordable intensity. Until the foreign fire felt native. It became foundational to countless Indian dishes and regional cuisines. And in South Carolina, a grower spent years breeding a pepper called Pepper X to break the world heat record, certified in 2023 at nearly 2.7 million Scoville units, hundreds of times hotter than a jalapeno. Yet that same defensive chemistry is sitting on your plate tonight, bright, familiar, and completely misunderstood. The next time you reach for the hot sauce, remember what you are actually reaching for. Not only a seasoning, a chemical the plant evolved to hurt animals like us, carried across oceans by human hands, folded into remedies, used in punishment and war. That outlived the empires that once taxed it and now rides on a police belt in a canister with a safety catch. We call it a flavor because that is easier than admitting what it is. The chili pepper was never just a flavor. It was always a weapon. If this changed the way you see the spice rack in your kitchen, tell me in the comments which everyday food you think has the darkest history hiding behind it. And subscribe, because next week we are pulling the label off another one.